Hello friends, this is the CrossMoto channel. Just a week ago, I was planning to present this to you as a combination of a review of the bike and the history of its development, with live footage featuring my friend Demon from the Demoto channel. However, unfortunately, the format had to be changed a bit. By the way, Diamond is doing fine. And in this episode, I invite you to join me for a chat about mini bikes. As usual, we'll talk about their history, interesting models, the concept, and much more. Make yourself comfortable. It's going to be interesting. Damn, if I had a machine like that when I was 7, I'd have peed myself from excitement. To understand the evolution of this technology, we need to give at least a bit of historical context. So let's start from the beginning. In the era of the late Paleolithic, okay, I'm just kidding. About 100 years ago, mini motorcycles didn't exist as such. And do you know why? There weren't any quality paved roads, not just in our backwater, but also in the Americas and Europe. That's exactly why, by the way, carriages had such huge wheels. How does wheel size matter? To put it simply, the larger the wheel diameter, the easier it is for the wheel to overcome road bumps. However, there's also a downside to the size, a strong gyroscopic effect. It's harder to spin up or stop such a wheel, and it also resists changing the plane of rotation. A compromise in wheel size has already been found in modern motorcycles. For road bikes, the standard is 17 inches. Enduro bikes may have slightly larger wheels, for example, a 21-inch wheel in the front. In general, the ancestors of modern scooters, like the French auto fauteuil and the American New Era, used to run on fairly large wheels because of poor road conditions. So, the auto fauteuil was introduced in 1902 by the Frenchman Georges Gautier and had 14-inch wheels in the front and 15-inch wheels in the back. And later, the ancestor of the scooter evolved, changing the shape of its frame and even getting liquid engine cooling. According to Mr. Gauthier, the unusual motor vehicle was superior. It was intended for certain social classes who wanted to maintain the dignity of their clothing according to their status and needed an economical means of transportation. With the advent of asphalt in the 1920s, it became possible for vehicles to switch to smaller wheels. A prominent example was the DKW Golem, which the German company produced between 1921 and 1922 in a quantity of about 500 dits, and this ancestor of the scooter was equipped with a 118cc two-stroke engine. Take a look at this advertisement poster, steering with one hand, smoking a cigarette with the other, and just enjoying the ride. But it took time to appreciate the advantages of mini motorcycles, and they found recognition among the military during the World War II. British paratroopers needed a mini motorcycle to carry out various tasks behind enemy lines. The British company Excelsior produced a mini motorcycle called the Well Bike for this purpose. The machine weighed 32 kilograms and fit into a standard airborne container. The Italians and Americans also worked on similar machines, but only the Well Bike was produced in significant numbers. After the war, the license to produce the Well Bike was purchased by Brookhouse Engineering. Their engineers modified it for civilians by adding lighting equipment, fenders, and suspension. The bike went on sale under the name Corgi. In 6 years, 70,000 units were produced. At the same time, these little vehicles were even imported to the US under the name Indian Papoose. Let's head across the Atlantic. In the US, the Powell Company, which started producing scooters in 1939, introduced the AB8 model a year later in the Harley-Davidson style, with 4 4x8-inch wheels and a single-cylinder engine of their own design. The Powell brothers showed ingenuity in their engine design. They took the most important parts, pistons, connecting rods, valves, and so on, from the popular Ford V8 engine. The unit, with a displacement of 344 cubic centimeters, produced 5 horsepower. After the war, Powell produced an improved model, the P81 on 12-inch wheels in 2 versions, the 394cc 8 horsepower Deluxe and the 426cc 10 horsepower Special. Back in the 1930s, American engineer Howard Forrest became interested in midget car racing, for which he even built his own miniature four-cylinder engines with a displacement of 311 cc. He installed one of these little engines in the chassis of a motor glide scooter and then built a custom frame for it. Howard worked at Gladen Products and used this machine to commute to work. This fact inspired the owner of the company, John Gladen, to start manufacturing mini motorcycles. The first batches of motorcycles, called Mustang Colt, were equipped with 8-inch wheels and 122cc English Villiers engines. And in 1947, a more advanced model appeared with 12-inch wheels and, for the first time in American industry, a telescopic front fork and a side valve 4-stroke engine. Bumblebee, 317cc 9.5 horsepower. Over time, the power increased to 12 horsepower, and the machine itself stayed on the assembly line until 1966. Mustang has several remarkable achievements to its name. Dick Miller rode this miniature motorcycle around the world in 1954. Walt Fulton, on a tuned version, set a record speed of 160.9 10-meters HI, and the factory team performed so successfully in competitions that Harley-Davidson and Triumph pushed for a ban in 1953 on racing machines with wheels smaller than 16 inches. Inspired by the success of the Mustang, the American company Cushman, then the largest scooter manufacturer in the U.S., introduced the Eagle model to the market in 1949. The model was shared as many parts as possible with the scooters. In 1959, the company introduced the Super Eagle model. The next wave of interest in mini bikes was sparked, oddly enough, by the twists and turns of automotive fashion. In the 1950s, passenger cars were equipped with protruding rear trunks, which soon became so large, especially on American cars, that they practically invited you to put something two-wheeled in them, just in case. The first to catch on to this new trend were American magazines like Mechanics Illustrated. They became filled with articles like how to make a mini bike out of a lawnmower engine, some junk, and a few sticks. And fortunately, the U.S. market was saturated with low-powered engines for powering all sorts of things around the house or on the farm. At that time, power lines in the U.S. hadn't reached every farm, so even washing machines were equipped with internal combustion engines. How do you like that kind of innovation? By the mid-1950s, dozens of companies had started producing these mini bikes. Companies like Arctic Cat, Rap, Taco, HIF, Gilson, and Fox were mass-producing these machines. At that time, Rap bikes already had a cult status, and the number of bikes made by garage craftsmen is impossible to count. If you have an engine and you're not all thumbs, then why not have some fun and build a mini bike or a go-kart out of scrap metal, and have a blast with other crazy DIY enthusiasts? Around the same time, kids started taking an interest in mini bikes too. After all, they always copy adults, don't they? By the way, something similar was happening in Japan in the early 50s. Initially, people organized local races on homemade mini bikes and go-karts, and probably none of those enthusiasts at the time could have imagined that these bikes would develop into a separate class of motorcycles. A little later, mini bikes began to be used by technical staff at drag races as a means of moving more quickly along the track and through technical areas. The miniature size allowed technicians to easily zip through the pit area crowded with equipment. A speed of 25 to 40 kilometers per hour was more than enough. Definitely better than wearing out your legs at 5 kilometers per hour. The bikes were ridiculously primitive. A frame, rigid suspension, small wheels, and a basic engine. But that was enough. In the early 60s, the Italians picked up on the new American trend. Companies like Ermacchi, Benelli, Fantic, Gorelli, Italjet, and many others started producing mini bikes. Italian machines were distinguished by their more sophisticated technical design. 50cc two-stroke engines, sprung suspensions, proper brakes, and electrical equipment. Most importantly, they stood out with their excellent design. Against this background, American bikes seemed like creations of a garage Frankenstein. The history of mass-produced Japanese minibikes began differently. In the late 1950s, the Honda Corporation, at the request of the administration of the big park in Tokyo, built a batch of tiny motorcycles with 50cc engines from the Super Cub scooterette. The machine turned out to be successful, and in 1962, an improved version called the Honda Monkey went into production. Other Japanese companies followed the example of the #1 motorcycle manufacturer, but it was Honda that would set the tone, releasing a new family of mini bikes onto the market every few years. Dux, Gorilla, Ride and Play, Motra, and so on. Its specialists even created the miniature motocompo bike for the mini car jazz. Against the backdrop of widespread popularity, similar developments were even carried out in the USSR. In Tula, work was underway on a bike with 10-inch wheels, and the Riga Mini was mass-produced. The heyday of mini bikes came in the 1970s, and around that time motorsport became more popular among younger people. To become a professional racer, you had to start training at the age of 6 or 7. Because of this, highly specialized mini bikes began to appear, for example, for children's motocross. For example, the Honda Z50R and Yamaha PW50 models became fun bikes for little kids, and companies like Italjet, LM, and others produced quite serious racing machines. A separate trend emerged with sports mini bikes for adult racers, designed for competitions on go-kart tracks. Deprived of gearboxes and soft suspensions, but with wildly tuned engines of up to 17 horsepower, they took motorsport to another level. Northern countries especially appreciated this kind of sport. Riding one of these little machines indoors is a great cure for motorcycle withdrawal. The first company to start producing these machines, called pocket bikes, was the Japanese company Jackson. But now Italian companies have taken the lead, and the Czech company Blata. The development of mini bikes was cut short by the scooter revival in the mid-80s. Everyone suddenly went crazy about scooters. Mini bikes were pushed out of most niches except sports. Now, road mini bikes are probably only produced by the Chinese, but the market for mini bikes for children and sports is still thriving. Nowadays, mini bikes have become widespread in many countries, including the former USSR. And more often, you can see kids on these kinds of machines whose parents bought them a two-wheeled toy. However, parents and young riders should keep safety in mind and remember where these machines should be used. I believe this issue needs to be addressed in more detail later in the story. It is also worth noting that mini moto competitions have produced many renowned motorsport greats. Many of them, having received racing training in childhood, later achieved success in other types of motorcycle competitions. Among them are racers like Valentino Rossi, Marco Simoncelli, Danny Pedrosa, and many others. Mini bikes can be classified by the following criteria: intended use, mini motocross, mini sport bikes, cruiser style, and utility models. By rider's age, from 2 to 4, from 5 to 7 years old, and so on, these criteria are reflected in the actual weight and dimensions of the motorcycles, as well as the potential of their engines. For the youngest riders, extremely lightweight bikes are created, sometimes electric-powered, and a speed limit of about 10 to 15 kilometers per hour. It's a different story with machines built for sports competitions for racers 7 or 8 years old and up. These mini bikes can already boast gasoline engines with a power of 7 to 10 horsepower and a rather bold character. So, the speed for mini sport bikes can reach up to 100 km/h. There is also a separate group of mini bikes designed to support the weight of an adult. The concept of a mini bike for children reflects its purpose. It should be easy to handle, lightweight, and safe. After all, the user of this product is a child. He doesn't understand complex mechanics or complicated controls. So, for the youngest riders, this motorcycle will have handlebars, a throttle, and brake levers. For older kids, a clutch and gearbox are allowed. There should be a simple start, either with a button using an electric starter or with a pull starter, commonly called a pull cord. The child must be able to get out from under a fallen motorcycle or simply lift it to a vertical position on their own. Moreover, the lightweight minimizes the severity of possible injuries. Lastly, safety. All moving or hot parts must be isolated from direct contact. In addition, ergonomics designed to reduce injuries should be considered. That means no sharp corners or protrusions, having footrests that fold away if you fall, and so on. In this regard, covers are put on cylinders, mufflers, and chain to prevent possible contact by the young user with hot or moving parts. In terms of safety, Yamaha has gone the furthest with their mini motocross bike model, the PW50. It uses a shaft drive for the rear wheel, which is enclosed in a solid cover. Safety measures also include limiters, remote controls, automatic engine shutoff in case of a fall, and so on. With the limiter, you can adjust the maximum speed of the motorcycle, and the remote control will allow you to shut off the engine if your kid decides to ride off into the distance or is heading toward an obstacle. And finally, a bit about safety. I've already talked about the concept of a safe mini motorcycle. Now it's worth mentioning the safety of the young rider. For example, when I saw a boy in Kupiansk riding a mini motocross bike, he didn't have any protective gear at all. A t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. Neglecting protective gear is an extremely unwise decision. At the very least, you should get a helmet and explain to your child that by wearing thick pants, boots, and a jacket, the risk of getting road rash is significantly reduced. Ideally, you should provide the rider with full gear. Yes, in a year they will outgrow it and you'll have to buy the next size up. But first and foremost, this is about your child's life and health. The second safety issue concerns where the mini bike is used. It's best if it's a specialized track or, at the very least, some kind of vacant lot. It's a different story when it comes to public roads, even if you live on a quiet street where cars hardly ever come through. A young rider still doesn't understand all the nuances of traffic rules. And besides, there's always a chance that some guy with loud music blasting will speed down your street in a lowered Jiguli with a sticker that says, "My life, my rules." By the way, that's actually a slogan for American rear-wheel drive cars, just so you know. So what I'm getting at is this: protect your children's lives and health. Don't skimp on their gear, and don't spare your time and effort explaining to them the basics of handling vehicles and the rules of the road. Friends, in this segment, I tried to cover the topic of mini bikes from all angles. I hope I succeeded, although it's possible I missed some facts. Thank you very much for your attention. You can support the channel as always by subscribing and sharing the video with others. You can also support the channel financially using the details in the pinned comment. You've been watching CrossMoto. See you next time.